Coffee with the Editor is proudly brought to you by IRZ and the Nhaledi Group of companies, which includes Nhaledi Ring Rollers, Composite Brake Components, and Nhaledi Foundries. Good morning and welcome to Coffee with the Editor. My special guest this morning is CEO of the Railroad Association, commonly called RRA, Mesela. Thank you for joining me. Mesela, thank you so much for joining me this morning for Coffee with the Editor, albeit rooibos. RRA, I attended your AGM 2 weeks ago. Great to hear all the progress. So today I'd like you to just give our audience a bit of a background on the Railroad Association, where you are now and where you're going, and we'll just take it from there.
Well, the RRA, known as the Railroad Association, currently is growing from strength to strength. We are engaging all OEMs, as you saw that all OEMs were represented at our AGM. And Transnet on board level delivered a keynote address. So we're trying to bring all industry players together under the RRA wing. Why is that important? If you want to consolidate the industry and speak in one voice in the industry, I think that is critical.
Current status. What's been happening? I know there's been quite a lot of change at the Railroad Association. So how have you as an industry association consolidated yourself?
Look, when I was appointed as CE at the beginning of January 2018, there was a lot of work that needed to be done for the association to be taken seriously as a player and as a leader in the industry. One of the things that we recognized was that some of the policies and the challenges that industry players were having problems with, there was no one to attend to them. We hosted our first localization workshop. There is a lack of understanding from the supplier side on what is designation policy, what is designated, and the designation, the application thereof. And then from the policy maker point of view, there is a designation of which they have drafted, there's an instruction notice, and there is a lack of enforcement from the policy makers. And from the policy perspective, certain items are designated, and what informs a designated sector. And from the industry's point of view is that they believe that they have the capacity to manufacture certain components, only to find out that they don't have the necessary standards. It becomes problematic for implementing the local content in terms of what is available locally. I'll give you an example. An OEM wants to have a component manufactured and they have a specification. Specification refers to an EU standard. You come locally, there is a supplier that has been supplying the component to Transnet or Prasa, but they don't have an EU standard. And the demand is that I want to have an EU, the local content cannot provide an EU standard. So that becomes problematic. And I feel that some of the local suppliers were intentionally left out of certain contracts because they don't have a certain standard that would be approved by a European or a multinational. So the localization workshop was meant to, let's have a discussion. What is it that we understand about local content, and where is the problem today? Why are we not benefiting fully from the local content? In some instances, there is the pricing issue. And I personally have a problem with that. South Africa is a constitutional democracy. We have laws, we have labor laws, we negotiate with the labor unions how much we're going to pay workers in a certain sector. So that is regulated. And then those costs will go into the pricing of a manufactured good. And then on the other side, an import part, employees or the rates that they pay the employees is not regulated. Then you can't really compare the pricing from a product from China, Europe, as compared to a product that is manufactured in South Africa, because there are certain costs that manufacturers cannot really run away from. And in the spirit of growing South Africa, becoming a manufacturing hub on the continent, and supporting government in creating employment, preserving the jobs that we have today, it makes sense that local content is adhered to more strictly.
Well, the input costs, I know from the foundry sector, for example, which is essentially where most products come from, or where manufacturing starts. The input costs are so different compared to that from like China or India, and that's because of the regulation. And it is important that South Africa or Africa starts creating jobs in their own country, not in China or India. And that's not to be anti-competitive, that is to build our own capacity.
Look, I think we're building a new country, we're reskilling, we have different policies in place, whether it's BEE, affirmative action, whatever you call it. It requires support in order to realize those policies. And those policies are not there as something to punish others, but we're saying as South Africans, let's work together in the best interest of South Africa, together.
Yes.
But having said that, what mechanisms to be put in place to support the policies? How are we going to have a skilled labor if we don't make funds available? If we don't, if we continue buying in China, as an example, and not take the pain of paying extra in the best interest of South Africa? And that's where I'm saying that we need to recognize that when you put a policy in place,
There will be a premium.
there will be a premium. And the premium that we pay is a premium that is patriotic. It's meant to be there to build South Africa.
Yeah.
And to build South Africa, create a manufacturing base with the idea that Africa as a continent looks up to South Africa for majority of manufactured goods.
Because when BE first came out, there was an acceptable premium around that.
Yeah.
So state-owned companies did pay a little bit extra, but then they got the BE, process going. We didn't have that for local content. We didn't have that for designation.
I think that when you have had a policy that works, like for instance BE, affirmative action, and then there's another one that comes in, it basically talks to the other policies. You actually have you have a foundation. Now you're moving and you're building walls. When you build walls, the foundation is those policies. Our blueprint as a country is the constitution. And in my view, being employed is a human right. It gives you dignity. So the blueprint is the constitution, and then it's supported by policies. And I don't see why we don't treat local content as seriously as we would treat BE and affirmative action, because those two policies talks to South Africa. Local content talks to South Africa, talks to in the best interest of the country.
The RRA has a close relationship with the Department of Trade and Industry, both as an industry association, working on policy and legislation, and as an export council. Do you want to elaborate on those processes?
That relationship is very important. From the export point of view, we've got an MOU on some of the deliverables, which is based on IPEP, the Industrial Policy Action Plan. and we do give an input on IPEP as well. But what we also do, we engage on outward selling missions and pavilions. In the year 2018, 2019, we have been to Cote d'Ivoire, Ethiopia, and Djibouti. In Cote d'Ivoire, we visited the African Development Bank. The purpose of the mission was to understand that from the bank's perspective, of which South Africa is a significant contributor, what is the benefit for South Africans? And we got a shocking statistic. The previous year, the 2016-2017, 13%, of their businesses or their funding benefited South Africans. And I think perhaps that South African businesses are not aware of where funding may be coming from, or what opportunities are being presented by the African Development Bank. And then we were in Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, we engaged on the African Union, and we then invited also to the UNECA. And on both levels, we engage on what projects are there, the improving or the recognition to improve African content on African projects. And after Ethiopia, we were in Djibouti. When we do outward selling mission, we engage on high level. We met with the Minister of Transport in Djibouti. We met with the chairman of the industrial zone. We were informed that they have a great need for rolling stock. The rate of which China is producing at the moment is not sufficient for them to meet some of their obligations in terms of their loads. And that is an opportunity for South Africa to supply some of the locomotives. And an outward selling mission, it's supposed to generate a sales lead. That sales lead was in turn sent to Transnet Engineering. I believe that they had acted on that sales lead. So, and then when we leave South Africa, we have an SA Inc. approach. And another mission that we were involved in, it was an outward selling mission to Angola. There we accompanied the Deputy Minister of the DTI, His Excellency Bulelani Magwanisha, and we also engaged on quite high level. We did a plant tour at CFL, and that engagement also led into a possible sales lead. There is a local company that was approached from given information, a couple of them. One took the opportunity to go and visit CFL, and at the moment they're at quoting stage. We did an OSM as well to Zambia. We were received by the CEO, Mr. Musonda, and we were taken on a plant tour and to be briefed by the CEO that Zambia is going on a mission to transform their rail sector. 30% of their cargo must go on rail. It's a massive opportunity for South African companies. It's a massive opportunity for the rail industry in general. And that information was shared with our members. We also had a meeting with the former Vice President of Zambia, Mr. Enoch Kabindele, and we discussed the Northwest Project. And because the engagement is on one-to-one, we get to understand the status of the projects, where are the bottlenecks, when can we expect something to be moving, when can we expect the project to get for them to appoint contractors, and most importantly, are they looking to South Africa or are they looking elsewhere? And if we know that they're looking elsewhere, we have to then step in to make sure that we promote South African companies and improve the value that they may obtain from the information that we provide.
Is your role also to assist the rail operators that you engage with in developing their own internal capacity?
That's quite interesting. When we were in Mozambique, we met with the board and they said they don't necessarily have capacity for their workshop, for their maintenance. And I think as South Africa, we have an advantage of investing in the SADC countries and beyond. Can you imagine a Mesela Pty Ltd recognizing that opportunity and actually setting up in Mozambique? But the beauty of that, you're not only setting up in Mozambique, you are setting up inside CFM, where they require the services. But
and could you do that as a consortium?
An SA link approach is required. I think South African companies have, in the longest time, operated in a silo mentality. I think it's time as South African companies to come together, form a consortium, and when there is a bid, provide a bid as SA Inc. That necessarily would include Transnet International Holdings or a local company where they will come together. That as private sector in South Africa, we want to bid for a project, whether in Ghana or elsewhere on the continent or even outside the continent. I think the plus 150 years that we have in the rail industry shouldn't just go to waste. I believe that we are capable of so much more as South Africans, and what is limiting us is the silo mentality. But if we were to take the approach of working as an SA Inc., there is so much that we can achieve.
Okay, sorry, we digressed a little bit. So let's just talk about the relationship that RRA has with the DTI. So we've spoken about outward selling missions, which are obviously well supported by DTI, and a key function and activity of the Railroad Association as an export council. But let's get more to the nitty-gritties of DTI and developing trade.
We also work with the Rail Cluster Desk, which is led by Thandi Pele and Major Komane. And one of the most critical things that we do with the Rail Cluster Desk is that if an OEM or any other company would like to apply for an exemption on a designated product, then the DTI consults with the RRA to give a view. Can we find this product on the market or not? Then RRA will provide an opinion, do a research, provide an opinion, and the DTI takes our opinion seriously into consideration. Last year, one of the OEMs for the 1064 went to the DTI and made 2 claims. One, that they can't find a supplier. 2, that they can't, the licenses is not available locally. I like people that make claims, because whoever alleges must prove. Then we ask them to provide evidence that really they cannot find local suppliers and that the licenses are not available locally. That resulted in having an industry meeting and then them presenting what they require. And as an RRA, we then had a meeting afterwards with the OEM to say, there's a company that does this, or there's multiple companies that manufacture this component that you're looking for, and here are the companies. And that in turn should actually inform industry players, whether you're a member of the RRA or not. They need to be a member of the RRA to engage with the RRA, because DTI comes to the RRA and say, do we have this? But if we don't have your company capacity or capability on the database of the RRA, it becomes difficult to give an informed view on an exemption application. So that is the power that we hold when we're dealing with DTI. But also when it comes to designation reviews, we currently are assisting DTI on the OHTE to gather information and say, what capacity do we have? And can we make this sector 100% local content? So we're looking at that.
Interesting.
But it needs to be informed by research. We cannot just have a policy that is empty, that is ideal to have this.
Yeah.
It needs to be based on research. If we don't have the capacity, let's say we want to have 100%, but we're giving the industry maybe 3 or 5 years to make sure that we have the 100% by that time. And also government should perhaps have mechanisms in place to encourage companies to invest. If local content or designation policy is not protected or there's no strict adherence to, it becomes difficult for an entrepreneur to invest because your investment is not protected. But so it works both ways. If you want the industry to invest, make sure that the policies you put in place can be fully be implemented and supported. But most importantly, do we have money to do the verification? Who can do the verification? And what is our role as industry to assist government where we see that there is a lack?
Yes.
It's a partnership. Government does not have all the funds, but it's up to us to assist government where we think government is falling short. There's policy in place. We can demand that if somebody makes a claim, say an OEM makes a claim, say I'm 70% local content, we can ask them to prove it. What informs that? SABS is the only entity that can do that. And perhaps going forward, we need to start having an engagement that can we have an accredited independent organization that would actually do or assist SABS to do verification of the local content.
Does SABS have the capacity? I mean, rumours in the market suggest not. Industry feedback from other sectors say that there isn't really much left of the SABS in terms of capability and capacity, and that the SABS mark really doesn't mean anything. So what are your views on that?
Look, I'm an optimist. I'm a South African through and through, and hence my approach has always been that when things don't work, they don't work because I'm not involved.
Okay.
And if I cause noise enough, somebody might be able to do something, and somebody on the other side may say, "Oh, come in, assist us to achieve what needs to be achieved from the South African point of view."
Yeah.
I know that Gaff from DTI is now at SABS, and we've seen his work at the DTI, and we believe that he's the right person to make sure that verification of local content takes place. It will require a little bit of time. I know for a fact that OEMs last year were called into a meeting and they were told that, we're going to start with the verification. And that simple meeting that took place, we started getting calls from OEMs. I'm looking for a supplier for this. Can you put me in touch with the industry for this? Then I go back to the point that if RRA doesn't know about your product, chances are you will miss out on business opportunities. So it's important to stop the silo mentality. Let's come together, make your product known, make your capacity known to the relevant organization like the RRA, that I can produce this product. And when people make claims that we don't have the capacity to produce this, and Mesela can say, I don't think so. Here's a company that can, you can go and visit them and satisfy yourself. And it also talks to like supplier development. There is no pick and pay when it comes to the rail sector. OEMs must know that they're going to have to invest. They have made commitments that they will do supplier development. Supplier development is not ticking boxes. Supplier development is actually doing the work. If a company does not have an ISO standard, you have committed to do supplier development. That ISO standard, it's your duty to make sure that they comply, because you contracted with government on the basis that you do supplier development, that you will localize. We cannot allow OEMs or state-owned entities to argue that there's no capacity. If you say there's no capacity, prove it.
Do you think we've covered the issue of standardization?
The issue of standards, when a multinational codes on a South African project, they will offer their product, and in terms of warranties and guarantees, suppliers have to be EN compliant or whatever international standard. You find that local companies are not compliant with those standards. And it becomes quite problematic that those standards are expensive anyway. So here you are with a project that you're supposed to benefit from, and it requires certain standard that you don't have. In my view, those standards are put in place to disqualify you anyway. And I think when we as South Africa need to have big projects, we need to think carefully about the specification, and we need to think carefully and link the specification to our project as a country. What do we want? The president said we want an export-led approach. But how are we going to achieve that? By growing local manufacturing. So they have to. The specification is to talk to the bigger South African agenda and make sure that South African companies are not excluded from big projects intentionally by standards. But I'm also of the firm view that as Africa, we need to have an African standard. But we can only achieve that through rail companies and railway men and women working together and recognizing a need to have an African standard. I'm not suggesting that let's reinvent the wheel, but let's have a standard, whether it's an EU, we copy things from it, whether an American standard, that we incorporate what works and make sure that it works for Africans.
So that it would be an equivalent to.
Yeah.
So if you're asking for this standard, the African standard is the equivalent of.
Yes.
Okay.
And I'll give you another example. Currently, CRRC would send out a drawing to a South African company to quote. One, we can't read the drawing. Two, it has a certain standard that we don't comply to. Then they would argue that we can't find a supplier on the basis of a standard. And I think that becomes problematic, and the standards are therefore used as a reason not to localize. Then you have a government that has invested, and in terms of my economics 101, government invest in order to create demand in the market and benefit the local economy. Then you find that local companies are not benefiting, employment is not creating, instead we're retrenching, but we're creating employment in other countries.
And that's what our industry is currently experiencing.
That is problematic. If a company like IEC Holden has to retrench, and this is an investor, it's an American company, you've told them that we've got a policy in South Africa, you have to localize. And they come in, they invest, and tell them that...
We also told them that there's a project here.
Yeah, and we also told them that there's a project, and the president has called them and come and invest, and they comply with all the rules. They comply with everything. They do the upskilling. It costs money to train people that are not skilled. And when they're supposed to benefit from their investment, they can't benefit because we import them. And you have 150 highly skilled female employees, black female employees, that has to be retrenched. So
it's unacceptable.
It's unacceptable. It almost sounds as if as a country we don't know what we're doing. We can't link A and B and C in order to achieve the greater good for South Africa. And if that is happening as private sector, what is it that we're saying? And where can we assist government to see the situation from our point of view? And how do we achieve alignment between different government departments? If Transnet, which is under DPE, has a tender, example, the dirty word 1064, how do we then link it up to the instruction notice from Treasury? How do we then link it up with the policy from DTI? They need to be talking to each other. That specification that comes out of Transnet, it needs to talk to that. At the moment, there's a misalignment from the country perspective, and I think that we need to start engaging and make sure that we achieve the alignment.
But why has it taken so long? And I ask you this because designation, and I said this the other day, designation as a policy has been a discussed point for many years. We've done valves, we've done this, we've done that, we've done buses. We actually haven't seen any growth in any of those sectors that have been designated. In fact, we haven't seen growth in those sectors. We've seen the exact opposite. So I think that many people, like you said, we don't know what we're doing. I think a lot of people are looking at what's happening, going, you're saying great stuff. You're talking a great talk. But what's actually happening and what's actually transpiring is the complete opposite. And 1064, dirty word or not, is actually a perfect example. We knew the capitalisation was coming. We knew this project was coming. We knew it as an opportunity to redevelop and reinvest in our rail sector. And we didn't.
Yes, that's what happens when you leave everything to government. Government works when people work. Government works when private sector works. We have recently seen the mushrooming and active participation of civil society. And some of the wins that we have had as a country in the past 8 months were actually achieved because we have an active civil society. And we demand to have better accountability from our government. We engage government. And I think as a rail industry, we have failed to do that. It is very easy to blame government, and it is very easy to blame somebody else, but what have we done to engage government? And it goes back to the silo mentality. We knew as an industry that there's a big investment.
We made that investment.
Yes, we made that investment, but we have missed out on the implementation.
Absolutely.
And one of the...
Can you give confidence? Can you give confidence to industry?
Yeah.
So not as Mesela, but as the Railroad Association, that the DTI is now on board.
The DTI has always been on board, and there are certain difficulties that any organization will run into, but the DTI has been instrumental in some of our small wins.
Yes.
The CSR or CRRC, the exemption, through that intervention, we saved the country 5 billion rands. So it's a partnership that works. It's not necessarily DTI only playing police.
Yes.
If as industry we understand what designation is or local content is, and you see a tender that is supposed to reflect a local content specification or requirement, and it doesn't, what do? DTI doesn't receive the RFQs. We do. But can we then work with the RRA and alert the DTI that DTI so it does not comply with the instruction notice? What DTI has a power to do, and they have previously done, is to have the tender withdrawn until it has a right specification. It has a local content requirement. And what we recently do, our members will alert us to cite there's 2 tenders at Transnet, one for fasteners and one for, let's talk about the fasteners one. It's 100% local content. The instruction notice says per way 100% local content. And the culprit is not only perhaps from an SOE, but Suppliers actually are the culprits because they are the ones that are actually queuing at DTI requesting exemptions to supply to Transnet in this particular case. So we find that problematic. And through the engagements we have with suppliers, they will then alert RRA, and we would phone Transnet, whoever is dealing with that tender, to say, by the way, there's an instruction notice on this tender, and in case that you don't have a copy, here is a copy. So there's two tenders that we currently are eyeing. So the buyers cannot claim after the fact that they didn't know about the instruction notice. It's the law. You need to comply with the law. Now, so in instances where an SOE does not comply with the law, then we need to ask government that if you expect me to comply with the law as a law-abiding citizen, if you expect me to comply with the law is a two-way street. The policies that you put in place, SOEs, they need to comply with those policies. Yeah. And if SOE is not complying, it's up to us to remind them that yes, the law, in case you don't know, because there's a possibility that shame, they don't know. It's our duty to remind them so that we don't cry after the fact.
Yes.
Preventative is more effective than going to engage in SOE after they've awarded the contract.
What is your view on competitive supplier development?
Companies that have obligation to have supplier development programs in place have missed the point. For them, it's a tick box exercise. I like to support my claims with an example. So Gibela had a supplier development, and companies that were identified were then placed at race call. And they sat in a class and they were taught presentation skills, how to do a 5-minute pitch, but they never benefited financially from the supplier development. Okay? And they missed the point. Now, if I have a registered company, I want to make profit. I don't want to go to class. But if they were to combine that soft skill and provide an opportunity to supply something to Gibela at the same time, I think that would have been a winner. But there are companies that have benefited through supply development initiative at Racecorp, but nothing came out of it.
Future of the Railroad Association. You've got a new board.
I've got a new fantastic board. Our new chairperson, Baba Lodzuzu, a fantastic dynamic woman. She has been in the railway industry for a long time. She has worked for Transnet, so we come with rich leadership skills. And besides, anything that is run by women, it's most likely to outperform our predecessors, from a feminist point of view. And we also have Jacinta, who has a huge, a fantastic background from having worked at RSR and in terms of developing standards. And then we have Robert Spoon. He used to work at Green Road at Makalo, that works at representing Imfuyo. Then we have Koketo Siripe that represents Echo. So you have a well-rounded board, and I think there's still a need to get more people on board, because in terms of our MOI, there needs to be 8 board members, but the current board has the capacity to nominate 2 more people to the board. Then we see what the needs of the RRA are and nominate people accordingly. And obviously, those 2 individuals have to be members. And we're moving into a new office. We're looking at relaunching the RRA and possibly changing the name of the association. And we're quite excited about the future. We're galvanizing the industry, and it's excitement everywhere.
Fantastic. And what are your outward selling missions for the next few months?
The list is not out yet. As soon as it is out, we will have it displayed on our website, and we'll also keep regular emails going through to our members, and encourage them to apply to the DTI. If you're a member, you can actually bring your application to RRA office, and then we'll take it through to DTI for you. And in some cases, we actually sit on a panel to select the companies that we're taking on an outward selling mission.
That's very exciting.
Yes, we work in the best interest of the country, and we support the government's effort to create employment. We want to be the leader on the continent to integrate Africa, and I think we're capable of doing that.
I think you are. Thank you, Mesela, so much for your time.
Thank you.
And I look forward to our next coffee with the editor.